74,000 years ago, the sky turned black at noon, and the world died. Not gradually, not over centuries. In a matter of weeks, nearly every human being on this planet was gone. The archaeological evidence is so catastrophic, so absolute, that when geneticists first discovered it buried inside your DNA, they refused to believe it. They ran the tests again and again, because what they found was impossible. Humanity had been reduced to fewer breeding individuals than a single troop of modern chimpanzees. We didn't just face extinction. We walked right up to the edge, stared into the void, and somehow, by a miracle so statistically improbable it defies explanation, a handful of terrified survivors pulled us back. This is the story of the year that should have been our last. You need to understand something about the world before the catastrophe. Humans weren't special. We weren't apex predators. 75,000 years ago, modern humans had been wandering the African continent for over 200,000 years, and we were losing badly. We had basic stone tools, fragile social groups, and almost no competitive advantage against the specialized hunters that dominated every ecosystem. Neanderthals controlled Europe with bodies built like tanks and brains just as large as ours. Homo erectus still clung to pockets of Asia after surviving for nearly 2 million years. Denisovans ruled the highlands with biological adaptations we still don't fully understand. And then Mount Toba exploded. It wasn't just a volcanic eruption. It was the largest volcanic event in 2 million years. When the Toba supervolcano in Sumatra detonated, it ejected more than 2,800 cubic kilometers of rock and ash into the atmosphere. To put that in perspective, Krakatoa, one of the most violent eruptions in recorded history, was a firecracker by comparison. Toba was nearly 5,000 times more powerful. The explosion was so violent it left a crater 60 miles long and 30 miles wide. You can still see it today. It's now a massive lake sitting quietly in the Indonesian jungle, as if the earth is trying to forget what it did. Within hours, a pyroclastic cloud of superheated gas and molten rock vaporized everything within a 100-mile radius. But the real horror hadn't even started. Ash began to fall. Not for hours. Not for days. For weeks. In some places, it piled 15 feet deep. Across the Indian subcontinent, entire forests were smothered under a choking blanket of gray powder. The ash cloud spread across continents, blocking out the sun. Temperatures plummeted. Some estimates suggest global temperatures dropped by as much as 15 degrees Celsius. In certain regions, it dropped even further. The Earth entered a volcanic winter that lasted a decade. Now imagine you're a small band of early humans trying to survive in East Africa during this period. You wake up one morning and the sky is gone. Just a thick, gray haze that never lifts. The temperature drops so fast that within weeks, the tropical forests you relied on for food begin to die. The animals you hunted either migrate or starve. Water sources dry up or become poisoned with sulfuric compounds. Your children start coughing from the ash in the air. Their skin breaks out in sores from the acidic rain. You don't understand what's happening because you have no concept of volcanoes or atmospheric science. All you know is the world is ending, and there's nowhere to run. And then the food runs out. This is where it gets truly horrifying. Genetic evidence suggests that at the peak of the Toba catastrophe, the global human population collapsed to somewhere between 3,000 and 10,000 individuals. Some researchers argue it may have been even lower. One study published in the American Journal of Human Genetics estimates we dropped to as few as 1,000 breeding pairs. 1,000. That's not a species. That's a single village. Every person alive today, all 8 billion of us, can trace our ancestry back to that tiny, terrified group of survivors who somehow made it through the volcanic winter. But here's the part that keeps anthropologists awake at night. We don't actually know how they survived. There are theories, of course. Some researchers believe a small population managed to hold on in isolated refuges in East Africa where conditions were slightly less catastrophic. Caves near the southern coast of South Africa show evidence of continuous human occupation during this period. These weren't just shelters. They were survival laboratories. Archaeological digs have uncovered advanced tool-making techniques, evidence of coastal foraging, and even the earliest known use of symbolic behavior, beads made from shells, suggesting that the survivors weren't just enduring, they were adapting. But adaptation requires something most species don't have when facing sudden extinction. It requires behavioral flexibility, the ability to completely abandon survival strategies that had worked for hundreds of thousands of years and invent entirely new ones in real time. And that's exactly what the evidence shows. Before Toba, human technology was relatively stagnant. Basic hand axes, simple scrapers, tools that hadn't changed much in a million years. After Toba, everything explodes. Complex blade technology, hafted spears, fishing equipment, long-distance trade networks. It's as if the catastrophe didn't just kill most of humanity, it fundamentally rewired the survivors. Some scientists call this the evolutionary bottleneck. But it's more than that. It's a genetic scar. When a population crashes that severely, diversity collapses. Rare genes vanish. Harmful mutations can spread unchecked. You can still see the evidence in your own DNA. Humans today have significantly less genetic diversity than almost any other large mammal. Chimpanzees, despite having far smaller populations, have more genetic variation than all of humanity combined. We are, from a genetic standpoint, almost identical. We're all cousins descended from the same tiny group of disaster survivors. And here's the disturbing part. It almost happened again. The Toba eruption wasn't a freak accident. It was part of a geological cycle. Supervolcanoes erupt on a semi-regular basis throughout Earth's history. Yellowstone, sitting quietly beneath Wyoming right now, is overdue. If it erupts with the same force as Toba, modern civilization would collapse within months. Our global supply chains, our agriculture, our technology, none of it is designed to survive a prolonged volcanic winter. We've built an incredibly fragile system on top of a planet that has repeatedly proven it can wipe the slate clean whenever it wants. But 74,000 years ago, the survivors didn't have supply chains or agriculture or technology. They had each other. They had the ability to cooperate in ways no other species could. They had language, or something close to it, allowing them to share knowledge, coordinate hunts, and pass down survival strategies. They had the cognitive flexibility to look at a coastline they'd never exploited before and figure out how to harvest shellfish. To take stones and bones and turn them into weapons capable of killing prey faster and stronger than themselves. And they had something else, something we've lost. They had an absolute, bone-deep understanding that survival was not guaranteed, that every single day was a fight against obliteration, that the world did not owe them anything. We live in a strange time. We've insulated ourselves so completely from existential danger that we've forgotten it exists. We complain about inconveniences our ancestors would have considered miracles. We've never had to watch the sky turn black and wonder if the sun will ever return. We've never had to make the choice between staying in a dying landscape or walking into the unknown with no guarantee of food or water. We've never had to bury most of our children and keep moving because stopping meant death. But 74,000 years ago, your direct ancestors made those choices. They lived through the worst environmental catastrophe in human history, and they survived. Not because they were stronger or faster or more violent. They survived because they refused to stop adapting. Because when the world collapsed, they looked at each other and decided that extinction was not an option. Every thought you've ever had, every choice you've made, every breath you take right now is the result of that decision. You are not just alive. You are the continuation of the most improbable survival story in the history of life on Earth. Your existence is a statistical miracle wrapped in 200,000 years of unbroken ancestral defiance. The most dangerous year in prehistoric times wasn't just a date on a timeline. It was the moment humanity was tested at the species level, and somehow, impossibly, we passed. We crawled out of the ash, looked at a broken world, and rebuilt. And every generation since has carried forward the genetic legacy of those survivors, a legacy written in your bones, firing in your neurons, reminding you that you come from a line that does not quit. The sky didn't stay dark forever. The ash settled. The temperatures stabilized. Life returned. And when it did, the survivors were still standing. We're still standing. And that matters more than you think.